My name is Amelia, and today's narrative is a little different. You see, I did something crazy. It all began last year when Grandma fell at home. She was 86 years old and in good shape for her age. But one day, while doing some gardening, she stumbled and fell. She would have been fine if she had been younger. Unfortunately, she suffered a dislocated hip and a broken wrist, leading my parents to decide on placing her in a nursing facility. That conversation, let me tell you, did not go well. My grandmother is a fiery woman with the tenacity of an ox, so the expression on her face when my father told her she'd have to move into a nursing home was priceless. For the rest of the week, she crossed her arms in front of her chest and refused to speak to him. Dad appeared agitated. I believe it worried him how obstinate Grandma was. He had no idea how similar he was to her, which was why there was always so much tension between them. But there seemed to be something more going on as well. I mean, Dad and Grandma fought frequently, but recently, Dad had been giving her the cold shoulder, and I couldn't help but wonder why. Had Dad done anything to irritate her? She'll go to any length to avoid having to move into a nursing home. We'll see how that goes. He then drove in the direction of the nursing home. Without even asking Grandma's permission, she made a deposit on her room and announced she'd be moving in the next day. What was my father up to? He didn't give a damn, he said. He'd drag her there, kicking and screaming if necessary. That's very much what happened the next day. As her father drove her away, she turned to him and exclaimed, "Son, you're a disgrace. Don't show up around here again." He tried to visit, but the nurse always turned him down, explaining that Grandma was feeling sensitive and had explicitly requested that he not enter her room. I was there all the time. I had always been close to Grandma, and I guess I felt terrible for her. She appeared depressed. When I asked whether she was okay, she leaned very close to my ear and murmured something that terrified me. She claimed the carers were violent and that they had just given her a blistering hot bath and burned her arm without even caring. When I looked down in her arm, it was, indeed, crimson and appeared to be excruciatingly painful. Unbelievable. How could they be so cruel to her? I was enraged and stepped up to speak with the lead carer on duty. Grandma grabbed the back of my dress and pulled me back just as I was about to leave. She begged me not to say anything because she was frightened they would hurt her even more if I did. This was ridiculous. I couldn't leave my grandmother in such a location. What were they going to do next? I resolved to stay for a few hours and keep an eye on them. We kept playing chess, and nothing happened. But just as I was about to leave, I overheard one of the male carers laughing and making fun of a woman named Sophia. My grandmother had mentioned Sophia previously, and I recognized the woman in the room next door. They were not only irresponsible in how they treated the locals, but they were also mocking them behind their backs. Wait until my father hears about it. Oh, he'd be fuming with rage. As I stood up to leave because it was becoming late, my grandmother asked if I could do her a favor. I assumed she wanted me to hide this from my father. Instead, she challenged me to do something insane. She requested that I assist her in sneaking out of the house, so she basically wanted me to kidnap her. I couldn't decide whether to laugh or cry. But then I noticed the red skin on her arm and realized what was going on. Of course, I'd abduct her. The next day, I returned and we planned everything. My grandmother liked gardening, and the carers and nurses knew it. So in the afternoon, while most of the other residents were sleeping, I wheeled Grandma around the home's grounds. I had to return it to the house. They really did have a lovely garden. And I knew there was a small gate at the foot of the garden that went to the road where we might flee. The location lacked security because I doubt many elderly people considered fleeing. So I was confident that our strategy would work. We pretended to look at all the flora as we walked towards the gate, and my grandmother was giggling like a schoolgirl the entire time. I couldn't blame her for wanting to get out of there. I'd want to flee from those nasty carers as well. Despite the fact that it was a cold day, I was sweating from nerves. We successfully reached the opposite side without attracting the attention of any birds. We liberated Grandma. Fortunately, I had gotten my license 6 months before, and my father had given me a car for my 16th birthday. So we left the wheelchair outside the gate, and I assisted Grandma into the front seat. That, however, was mistake number one. We hadn't really thought it through thoroughly in all the excitement, and we didn't expect someone to spot the wheelchair and then phone home to report it. But that didn't happen right away. Grandma's first thought was to have some ice cream. So we drove right there. ordered 3 scoops apiece, and then went to the beach to dip our toes in the water. Grandma seems to be content. It was great to see her like that. When I asked her what she wanted to do next, she stated she wanted to go to her favorite restaurant for burgers. She stated that she missed fast food and was starving because the nursing home only served her once a day. We ordered burgers, fries, and milkshakes, and Grandma was overjoyed once more. It felt like old times until my phone began to ring and I worried. It was Mom calling. I didn't respond, so she called again and again. I decided to respond after the 4th time. I didn't want her to have any doubts. Mom started shrieking as soon as I answered, saying the nursing home had called, Grandma had gone missing, and did I know where she was? I've never been a good actor, so I couldn't possibly lie to her. I explained that we were only driving in my car, but that we'd be back shortly and that no one needed to be concerned. My mother, on the other hand, is not a moron. She could obviously hear the infamous music the particular diner typically played, and I knew we just had about 10 minutes until she came. Grandma didn't appear bothered, which surprised me. I dashed to the restroom and told her she needed to finish her meal immediately. She had a wild smile on her face when I returned. Grandma, what have you done now? I inquired about her. I could see she'd been looking at my phone. She, on the other hand, refused to inform me. She just kept smiling in a sly manner. Everything seemed odd. Shouldn't she have been concerned about what her parents would say? I didn't want her to have to go back to that horrible nursing home. I tell Mom about the hot bath and how harsh the staff were as soon as she got there. Mom parked outside and Dad was also there. Oh no, he'd go insane if he saw Grandma. I gathered our belongings and Grandma paid the bill. It was time to confront the facts. We had a fantastic day, but we were now in tremendous trouble. I had a feeling. Dad was marching towards us before we even opened the diner door, a stern grimace on his face. Dad would bar me from leaving the house for the rest of my life. Mom, what do you think you're doing? He yelled. Amelia, you too. You're in big trouble, my dear. Mom, hurry up and get in the car. I'm returning you to your home. However, Grandma only chuckled, and I found myself speaking out. I told Mom and Dad what had happened, and they just glanced at me as if they didn't believe me. Grandma blushed and admitted she'd made it up, wanting to get out of there. She stated that they actually treated her quite nicely, but she just didn't want to be there and that she would rather be somewhere else. I couldn't believe she had deceived me. Why? Then she stated that she had something else she wanted to tell me. But before she could, Dad began yelling. Oh, Mom, please. Look, you're either moving in with us or returning to the nursing home. There is no one else who can take care of you, and don't even think of bringing up the gym man. Dad yipped. I'll take care of her. A voice from behind Dad said. We all turned to look, and there was an elderly man standing just behind Dad. He was beaming from ear to ear, his automobile keys jingling in his grasp. What was his name, and who exactly was Mason? I was astounded. Then Grandma burst out laughing and walked over to him, kissing him on the cheek. So that's who she dialed on my phone when I was in the bathroom. But who exactly was he? My father then shook his head and remarked, Oh no, is this that Mason fellow? I told you Mason was a decent man, but you didn't trust me. It's been 5 years since your father died, and I like to believe he'd be pleased that I've gone on and found someone as nice as Mason. Please don't be harsh now. Come say hello. You should have seen Dad's expression. His jaw almost hit the floor. I simply stood there looking. Was this to imply that Grandma had a boyfriend? I didn't have one at all. My grandmother was full of surprises. She told me that the carers were mistreating her simply so she could get away and be with Mason. Hilarious. I had no clue my grandmother was so mischievous. In addition, I had no idea what my parents had known all along. But wait, did Dad place her in the home to keep her away from Mason? But that didn't make sense. I yelled, wait a second. Dad, did you really place Grandma in a home so she couldn't live with Mason? But why is this so? Why would you do such a thing? That is not at all fair. Grandma is an adult who can make her own decisions. Then things became awkward and Dad began yelling at Grandma. Then Mom started yelling at Dad. And all I did was stand there, stare at Mason, and shrug my shoulders. I approached him, shook his hand, and introduced myself. Then I apologized for our wild family, and he simply laughed and claimed his family was the same. Then I returned to Dad and Grandma and ordered Dad to quit acting like a child and to let Grandma do whatever she wanted. I told her that Mason had come and that I hadn't seen her this pleased in weeks. Dad was hesitant to allow Grandma to travel with Mason, but as you may have guessed by now, my grandmother was not about to listen to her son, so she went off with Mason, and I've never seen her look happier.